For those of you who are joining for the first time today, Third Path Institute is a national nonprofit celebrating our 20th anniversary. And long before others discovered the importance of including men in the work-life integration discussion or the science of pushing back at overwhelm so we can all work smarter, we were showing people how to do work, family, and leadership differently. Did you know that over 71,000 people checked out our free resources last year, like the live and recorded versions of our Thursday webinars? We're glad you're here today. And as you will quickly discover, today's webinar truly celebrates all that we've discovered in the last 20 years. And one reason we're celebrating this amazing information is because we have someone who was a real pioneer around these concepts. Many years ago, Dr. Pepper Schwartz wrote a wonderful book about peer marriage. I remember searching it out because I wanted to see if there was someone out there thinking about some of the same things I was thinking about. And sure enough, she was exploring the concept of could two people who are raising children together think about how to create a relationship where they were peers, both at work and at home. She's gone on to be this amazing person in so many ways, including being the expert on this wonderful TV show, Married at First Sight. If any of you haven't watched it, it's a lot of fun to watch. They're on their 7th season too, so quite popular. Hey, Pepper, I'm so glad you're here today. Welcome. Is there something you wanted to share with us before we get going into some of the questions you and I discussed?
Well, the only thing I thought was interesting when you talked about when I published my book many years ago, I had trouble getting it. A lot of editors said it was just not possible, and that I found, very eccentric people to interview. But nobody says that anymore. It may need some conscious purpose, but the idea of a peer marriage is no longer seen as a unicorn.
Yes, yeah, I think that that has been our history too. I can't tell you how many people thought that it was a crazy idea that men really wanted to share in the care of their children, a crazy idea that we could set limits at work so we have time and energy for the things that we care about in addition to work. So that unicorn seems to be thriving today around us, and I'm really happy to talk about it with you. So I got a chance to talk to Pepper before today's webinar, and we came up with a couple of questions. In particular, today's webinar is looking at this idea of how do you get two people, whether they're two moms, two dads, a mom and a dad, raising children together, how do you get them to be on the same page? Too many times people have conflicting goals at home, and this can really make it very impossible to put into action some of the ideas that Third Path advocates, which is creating a life where you have time for work and time for the other important things in your life. So today we're really exploring this concept of how to get on the same page, how to get away from those conflicting goals at home and really create this peer or shared approach to parenting. You're also going to hear from Jana Kors-Esri a little later. She's an amazing story of someone who started one way around how she approached work and family, where really she was the primary flexing parent. And today she and Graham are doing shared care. So you stick around and learn how Jana got this discussion going in her household and why Graham and Jana have benefited from this change. So one of the first questions I wanted to talk about was a word that came up in our conversation, the concept of customizing a relationship. And all the way through, if you're looking at your screen, you'll see that all the way through today's webinar, we're talking about some free resources that you can go and look up and see these ideas in action. So if you went to our Meet the Pioneers blog, you would see people who customize their relationship. If you went to our Across the Lifecycle blog, same thing, great stories there. And in all of them, and this is what Pepper and I will talk about, it's helping people think differently about how do you want to approach work? How do you want to approach parenting? How do you want to share things at home? How do you want to create time for life? And by the way, not everybody's going to be the same. So Pepper, what have you been learning about how couples can customize their relationship? And when we're ready, I can tell you an example of one of those couples too.
Well, I think it's really important to note that the more communication of what you really feel and what you really want, the better your chance of having a truly great relationship. So that the exercise that you would go through to create a peer marriage is the exercise people should go through no matter what kind of marriage they're trying to put together. Instead of have unfulfilled dreams, expectations, and afforded goals, et cetera, that they never got a chance to see if they could modify and negotiate. The idea being, and I think this is one of the great things of the time we live in, that you don't have to follow lockstep into what your parents did or what your neighbors do or anybody else but you. And so what you have to do is say, okay, what do we have to do? Not that we have a problem, but what do we have to do to solve this as a marriage and come up happier and stronger and better parents?
Yeah.
And that means putting everything on the table, but it also means everything on the table, which is, okay, let's look at our work schedules. Let's look at our goals in work. Let's look at what conflicts with our highest priorities. And by the way, what is our highest priority? Is it our children? Is it our jobs? If we were going to make a percentage of what's important to us, which ones would be in the top 3 or 4? And if those are our priorities, to try and match how we live our lives to match them. A lot of people's priorities and the way they live their lives have absolutely nothing in common. So I think it's extremely important to say we can create, just like you go and get a suit or a dress that's measured exactly to your measurements, which a manufacturer can't do as well as you can, same way as you can find a marriage that fits. And if you're willing to just open up the categories and see what works for you, you can end up with something wonderful.
Yeah, and I love what you said of don't necessarily look at what your neighbor's doing or your colleague at work or what your parents did. This is a world where we can really do work and family very differently. So Pepper, I'm now showing a picture of one of the families that's part of the Third Path community. And this story happens to be part of our Across the Life Cycle blog this month. And it's a family, it's a very simple solution. They, way before they had kids, they made many decisions around how to set up their lives so that when their first child arrived, they could both work a 4-day work week and they could have a mommy day, a daddy day, and 3 days of childcare. And if you were looking at the screen, you'd see that finances was highlighted because they had to think ahead about how to make it work around money too. How could they afford to do this? In fact, again, free resources up in that top right-hand corner. Literally, if you put the words third path money and work-life balance into the search engine, you're going to come to this story where, in this case, Lisa Levy, the wife, talks about how they made this work financially. And we have this great person who helped us think about money and work-life balance on that webinar. So anyways, the point being, everybody can think about what's right for them. Don't look at your neighbors. And part of the solution is thinking differently about money too. So where do people stumble as they're trying to customize things? What gets in the way? What are the big hurdles?
Well, you're mentioning probably one of the biggest ones. That is, if you're going to have both parents involved with a child, you may have to not maximize income. I noted that when I did the study that I did on peer marriages, that very few of them had a really extravagantly high earner in them. They were most likely teachers and social workers and people who had nurses who had flexibility jobs and could in fact create a job that was congruent with their child raising priorities. If they were an attorney, we had a couple of attorneys, but they weren't in big firms. They were in small firms where they could cover each other and with like people who shared their values. So that issue about money is a big one. The second one is your reaction of your family. Parents are often okay with a woman modifying her career, but not so much on a man. And you can get some pushback, like, what are you doing? And, doesn't, traditionally male to them, et cetera. So in a sense, you have to be able to interpret your values and to educate your parents because, you do care how they feel and you're going to have to deal with that. And I guess the third thing is to be open to readjustment. Fact is, the first plan may not work as well as subsequent plans, and you have to understand that just because your first plan doesn't work doesn't mean your goals and your values aren't achievable.
Yeah, yeah, well said. And I'll tell you, here's some exciting news. And again, maybe this is an example of how things have changed, because one of the points we were going to talk about in this webinar is how things have or have not changed in 20 years. It's our 20th anniversary. It's about 20 years ago that you wrote that book, maybe a little bit longer. And
Yeah.
one of the ways things have changed is we've now actually supported a community of people who are moving ahead in their careers. So we do now have people who we have a person who's a CFO and they did this approach. We have a person who's a partner of a law firm. So the world is slowly changing, and we really are seeing that you can be follow this approach and move ahead in your career. And again, you're going to still be probably the unicorn at work when you do this, but they're not either or, luckily, anymore. There really are ways to do this, and we'll be talking about this all year long, as how we can support those who want to move ahead in their careers, keep to their career goals and life goals. I want to point out one other way things changed that you and I talked about. If you were looking at your screen, you'd see that life keeps on changing. Families keep on changing. You start with babies, and then they're school age, and then you might have elder care. Life and work keep on changing. And so the solution that you quote unquote customized at the start of balancing work and family might not work as those life and work things change. Any thoughts about that, Pepper?
Well, I think that's true. If your life doesn't change, I mean, I think you're probably dead. You just haven't noticed. Because the rest of us can't avoid it, right? I mean, if we have kids, they go through periods. Our jobs go through periods, and I think it's really important to think that, okay, this is the plan for this year. This is the plan for maybe a couple of years, but beyond that, it's really hard. On the other hand, you can have a situation where, okay, you need X amount of years of full job throttle to get established. That's often true in some jobs where you have to prove yourself before you have any flexibility. Okay, we're going to do it this way during this period, and then we're going to switch in a different period. I think the idea is in customization, to go back to it. I believe that you've got to have a plan that fits your children's lives and your own, with mindful that sometimes things like health, et cetera, come in that you didn't expect, and so be it. If there's anything that can describe this century, it's to be resilient and be flexible, because you're going to need it. The rules keep changing. The world keeps changing. Technology has made some jobs much more easy to do than they ever were before. There's some recognition of a 4-day work week can just be as productive as another kind of work week. I mean, we're in a period where things are being considered. It's also, I think, what you have to do is a little bit of research for each period you're in. What has changed? What resources are available? And okay, we're going to have maybe change horses again, but that's what modern life is.
Yeah. And in fact, again, I think resiliency is one of the wonderful things about peer marriages and shared care, is because, again, you have in a two-parent household, or even a divorced two-parent household where they share care, you have two parents who are competent at caring for kids, two parents who are competent at earning income, and so the ups and downs of work and life can be shared between them. A simple example, when a kid is sick, both are equally competent at thinking about, am I the one who takes off work today, or should I take off a half day today? So you've really created a very different, more flexible and sustainable system as a whole family. That's wonderful. I want to show one more question. So what are some tips we have for people about creating a more peer-like or shared approach to work and family? Or what are some of the pitfalls? And by the way, if you're looking at our screen, again, there's a free resource. You could literally search, third path, benefits of shared care, and it would take you to one of our blogs where it lists all the different books out there about shared care. I've got some of them on the screen right now. And it's got one of our Thursday webinars with Kristen Mashka, where she talks about her book, This Is Not How I Thought It Would Be. It's a great book about how she too made some big changes around work and family. So there's a lot out there, but Pepper, what do you want to start with? What are the pitfalls of trying to adopt a peer approach or a shared approach? What are the opportunities of adopting this approach?
Well, the pitfalls are many because, let's say one person gets a big promotion. It's a lot of money, but it requires much more time. And you go like, how can we pass that up? We don't want to. We want to empower the person who's getting that. So one pitfall is you take something that you think you can cope with, and suddenly it starts to change everything you agreed upon. It is true that I think another pitfall is maybe because you get so organized around the children that you forget about the marriage. And yes, you're being egalitarian and you're both doing child raising, but you're not doing relationship maintenance. You're more than a team. You're lovers. You have to remember that while this is about work and children, it is also about love and sex and loyalty and commitment to the thing you got married for. So, I mean, the idea also is you can get a little too nitpicky. You did this, I did that. You have to find some wonderful way between equality, where you both have to split everything down the middle, to equity, what is fair, what actually enables our goals. The positives, though, I think truly outweigh the negatives. First of all, you have a valuable parent that you care. You're not resenting. Women aren't resenting the fact that, they're doing everything, because they're not doing everything. And men are learning the joys of being a caretaker and being truly intimate with their children. Once they learn that, they don't want to give it up. They become truly integrated into their children's life in a way that really, truly makes a difference in their happiness, much more than I think they thought it would. You have much more respect. You have much more backup. When you say you have someone at your back, you really do have someone at your back. And I think, you could see this also as a pitfall or a strength, however which you think. I think what you have to do is also be an activist, not only in your own behalf of your family, but at the same time you're an activist for yourself. You're an activist with others, which is to say you educate the institutions and jobs, et cetera, that you're involved in. I mean, daycare, for example, at jobs is much more common now, certainly in the really big corporations. But that started because people insisted upon it. They say, you want us to be more productive? Well, we need child care close so we can monitor them, be involved with them, and give you a full day, et cetera. So all those things that you are and you do to maintain this are also things you have to educate the world with. And I think you are a team doing that. I think this pulls couples together in such a tight, wonderful way. Now, that means there can be conflict, going back to pitfalls, because, it's not just the woman who says this is the way we're going to raise the children and that's that, which is the more traditional way. There may have to be a lot of negotiation. But I think the negotiation ultimately creates a tighter bond, even if it gets some rough going and on the way there.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. I knew I had an expert on the call. This is fabulous. Wonderful.
Thank you.
And I just want to underscore a couple of funny things that you'll chuckle at. Yes, we don't want to forget the couple. In fact, one of the things that we've really learned is the health of the couple is the health of the family, and that goes for every kind of family system. So my husband and I joke that because of my mother-in-law, who's just a fabulous person, we ended up having a regular date night on Friday night. And so we would joke that maybe it wasn't the fact that we'd learned how to really share care that made our relationship so healthy. It's the fact we had a Friday night date night every week when the kids were little. That's a pretty good thing. So yes,
it's a huge thing.
Take care of your relationship with each other. That is a real important priority. And I liked your point about equity, not equality. There's actually a free resource on our website right now. If you go to our free resources page, we have a quiz up from B. Hibbs. She's been someone on our Thursday webinars too. It's about how to make sure you are good at looking for equity in your relationship. And it's a little survey you can take, you and your partner, to help think outside the box about how to get better at looking for a solution that feels equitable to both of you. And again, remember, your answer might look different than your neighbor's answer, than your colleague's answer, than your sister's answer, certainly than your parents' answer. So you're looking for the answer that's right for you guys. This is fabulous. Okay, I'm going to put up one last question, I think. Oh, next to last question. So here's the question. You've been dating. It's feeling more serious. How do you know you should take the next step? So how do we help people think about, if they're interested in peer marriage, shared care, what should they be thinking about when they're about to get more serious?
Well, I think, there's a sort of putting a toe in the water and seeing how it feels thing to dating. At one point you think like, we're spending all our time with each other, and I better leave the toothbrush there because I'm there a lot, and it really feels comfortable, and this feels something special, and you start talking and giving words of affirmation, etc. And part of that putting your toe in the water is seeing if, in fact, you two see marriage and family in the same way. And sometimes you may have a partner who hasn't actually thought about it. I mean, they just saw their parents' marriage. That's kind of what they know. They're not ideologically opposed to a peer marriage. They just haven't even visualized it. They don't know. So I think the thing is, when you're starting to get serious, then it requires you to start saying, well, if we were to have a life together, how would you feel about, sharing childcare? Or, I would like at some point to be able to drop back to half time, because I think, what's really important to me is being there for my kids more. Or, putting all those things kind of out as little, test cases and see what the person says. Because if you're educating them, then they think that's great. They just hadn't considered it. That's wonderful. If they think about it and they say, well, yeah, I would like that. Or if they don't, if they're really truly opposed to the things that are most important to you in terms of lifestyle that way, best to know as early as possible.
Yeah, yeah, well said. And I love that idea of doing like test cases and just kind of thinking and seeing what their reactions
Mm-hmm.
are over time.
Right.
That's going to give you a lot of information. And there's so many stories I could share about how Jeff and I wandered down that path, but I'm watching the clock. I know I need to make sure we get to a certain time and then get you off the call for your next thing that you're responsible for. What you're looking at, if you're looking at the screen right now, is this concept we've really learned over the last 20 years, that following this integrated approach where you have time for work and time for this other priority, in this case, family, is a process. It is not a one-time stop check solution. And so, yes, you're going to be thinking about these issues as you think about getting more serious with somebody, but I guarantee you are going to be thinking about these issues even after you get serious with somebody and after you have a baby and after you have, school-age children. I mean, Jeff and I have been thinking about these issues all the way through. We had to deal with elder care recently. That was another time where we had to kind of think about these issues. So you're learning a process here that you're going to repeat over and over again. I want to get to why is a community of support so important, unless there's something else you want to share first, Pepper.
No, I think that's a really important point because, we're Americans. If you've lived in this country a long time, you sort of have inherited this idea that, we all pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and it's up to us as people. And if we fail as a person and not as a community. But I think in general, we need more community, and specifically we need the support and the ideas and the backup of more than just ourselves and more than just our partner. We need the people who are also committed to these kinds of goals. So you can share, driving the kids to school. You could share with somebody if your kid was sick in the middle of something you could not get away from and your partner could not get away for. And you also need somebody to say, yeah, this is great. This is the right thing. That's why people create community. We all need emotional, we all need practical, and we all need almost spiritual support, for who we are and what we're trying to do in life.
Yeah, well said. And I saved this for last because it is the best and it is most important. And I was joking with Pepper that I don't think I would be able to be as enthusiastic about this mission and this possibility if I hadn't had the support and the community around me. Again, the practical, but also that kind of more emotional support, because sometimes you do feel like you're the only person trying to do it differently. And having some support out there really helps us stay the course when things will be hard. There will be times when things are hard, and it helps us move through those hard times, maybe even learn some lessons from those hard times. Wow.
Absolutely.
We're going to share one more thing, and then I'm going to ask Pepper if she has one last thought she wants to share, one last pearl of wisdom to share with us before we hear from Jana and how she made this major change around her work and family situation. Speaking of communities, Third Path has got a lot of communities for you. We've got a community called our Overwhelm Mitigation Group, where we can teach you some of these work-life integration skills. We've got our Whole Life Leader community, where if you are a professional who's really been trying to follow this path and you feel like you're the only one in your organization, we've got a group for you where you can meet other people just like you. And Jana is part of our Integrated Life Advocate community. Those are career counselors, couples counselors, work-life coaches, or just passionate people like Jana who want to go out there and make change around this. So we've got a community that you can join and learn more about. Um, I also want to remind you about their free resources. If you search Third Path, the Importance of Hope, you'll read my commentary about even me, someone who's been at this for 20 years, feeling pretty good about how I've made work and family work. There are times when I feel hopeless, and my community is what helped me stay the course. So thank you, Pepper. What last words of wisdom would you like to share?
Well, in some ways, they echo what you're saying. Nobody's perfect. We're not perfect in anything, and we're not going to be perfect in this either. And I think people need to give themselves points for trying, for having a North Star, for having conscious purpose about what they want their relationship and their family and their obligations to be like in this long life we hope we have. But the fact is that we go up and down in our own abilities to do what we want to do, and to just realize that there'll be times when it doesn't all fit exactly as you thought it was going to. But the fact that you are trying to do something and that you keep looking to what was your conscious purpose and come back to it when you haven't been there for a while, that's to be applauded. I think people are often too rough on themselves, too judgmental about themselves, and not enough, like, okay, I'm trying, I'll get up, I'll do it again, see how it works this time.
Yes, amen to that. That is really what we all need to learn and continue to learn. Pepper, thank you so much, and thank you for being the pioneer that you've been and for the wonderful work you're still doing.
No, thank you very much. Well, it was easy to be a pioneer in the sense that one has to follow, one's deepest values and one's deepest hopes about how life should be lived. And so even if you're a lonely voice in the beginning, it's very satisfying to do something that you think not only good for yourself, but good for a lot of people. And I just so appreciate what you've done in terms of activating all kind of support and resources and platform for people who want to live as a pure marriage.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a safe next step with what you're involved with, and thank you for being part of today's webinar. We're going to hear from Jana next. And again, stay tuned because it's really going to be a way to we've been learning from our webinars, hear from an expert, and then see how it's applied. And so this is going to be a great chance for you to really hear about how Jana learned that, she set up her life and work and family one way, but X amount of time into it, she started realizing, nope, that's not what I really want anymore. And there was kind of some growing frustration. And so for the rest of our webinar, we're going to be talking about, so how did she make a change? Because some of us listening in today might be in that exact same boat, and they're looking forward to learning from you, Jana, about why this is possible to make a change. So welcome, Jana, and we want to start by, how the heck did you meet Graham and know he was the right person for you to, get connected with for that lifetime plan?
Yeah. Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to Dr. Schwartz. It was really so fun to hear her, having, read her work previously. It's really just a thrill to be involved with her. But so Graham and I met in college, and we kind of, he dumped me, we dated 5 years later, I dumped him, but something kept drawing us back together. And I don't think it was so much that he was the one. He told me that he didn't believe in the one. He thinks that you have to make it the one every day. And that little statement was enough to make me think that he was the one. So, someone who is willing to work at it and make it what we wanted, kind of,
Yeah.
in Pepper's words, customize the relationship.
Yeah. And I think you told me when you were dating, you noticed that he was someone who you maybe even were a little bit of a workaholic. He worked hard, but he also loved to really get involved with fun life things too. So was that of an interest to you too?
Yeah. So when we finally got back together the third time, I was kind of a workaholic teacher, and he was working hard too, in business. But he had a series of jobs where he would work really hard and then he would quit his job and he would go climb mountains. Um, I had zero interest in climbing mountains, but he asked if I wanted to go sailing, and that sparked my interest. And so um, we quit our jobs and we sailed across the Pacific on our honeymoon. And, you know, that kind of work hard, play hard attitude definitely attracted me to him. Um, but it's been a long journey to figuring out how to actually work hard and play hard at the same time.
Yes, yes, and that's what we're going to be telling you guys as you're listening in today, a little bit about some of the secrets they learned around that exact thing. In fact, if you're looking for a good book to read, honestly, Jana is an excellent writer. I thoroughly enjoyed her book, The Motion of the Ocean. It is just a fun read about the beginning of their relationship. You know, really, just a lovely, lovely book, well written. So, shout out for that. So, when you first had your daughter, who's a young lady now practically, how did you set up things around work and family? What were your expectations when you first launched into the work family balancing arena?
Well, I think like lots of people, we kind of looked at just the basic economics. And I was a teacher, and Graham was a business guy, and he made more money than I did. And I had also shifted into writing from teaching, so he really made more money than I did. And so the basic economics kind of said, well, he should, you know, work to fund the family. And I thought that I could just flex my work around having a baby and ultimately having two kids. So the challenge there was that I grossly underestimated how much work there was to do for home and kids,
Yeah,
and he did too.
yeah,
So
yeah.
ultimately, it didn't really work for our family.
Yeah. It's and again, I think there are many people listening in today, and the ones listening to the recording, who are nodding their heads because they are either in that exact situation, they're in this exact boat right now, all puns
Mhm.
intended, or they were in that boat and they hopefully have figured out how to make some changes. Because again, some families are very happy with what we call a one-parent flex. Either it's the mom who's the primary flexor, or the dad who's the primary flexor, and the other one is kind of freed up to focus on work. And that could be just the right customized family solution for you. But if you're interested in more of a peer or shared approach, which over time Jana then started thinking maybe that's what she wants, that's not going to work so well. So that's our next question. So how have you arranged things today, and what motivated that change?
Um, I think on a fundamental level, the motivation for change for me was just frankly that I was a feminist, and I had not expected, and my husband too was a feminist, and I had not expected all of the minutia to fall to me. I thought that he would go to an office and I would work in my home office while kids were sleeping or while they had childcare, and then we'd kind of share everything after that. And when that didn't happen, I felt a lot of resentment. Um, and kind of my ideals weren't being met, and that was disappointing. Um, so for a long time, we kind of drifted along in, you know, these murky waters that were not so comfortable. But ultimately, we had a big change when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and I really had to pivot and focus on supporting her. And Graham, to his credit, pivoted and really did more at home. And once we kind of were forced to do that, then we started having some really interesting conversations about how to instill that in our everyday life.
Yeah. And I think again, just as you're listening in, I know her story, so I want to underscore a point. There was some resentment. There was some
Mm,
frustration. You were living in a family system where, yes, you were making it through and things were in many ways going in the right direction, but there was also frustration, resentment.
yeah.
Um, Help the listeners What did that look like? How did that seep out? Or did it seep out?
Oh, it felt incredibly stressful, both practically, physically, mentally stressful, but just I think that feeling that people have, or that I had, of like, really, this is what family is like in the modern world. Um, and Graham and I, we share the same ideals. So how was it that we could have conversations about equity, and yet it was so very difficult for us to enact. And on a side note, I read a ton about and learned actually through Third Path about all the things out in our culture and in our business communities that are set up so that it really makes things challenging in the current or the traditional setup. But I had to believe that there was a way where Graham and I could shift the needle in our own family ourselves, despite kind of this culture that lacks basic supports for families.
Yeah, and that's worth underscoring too. Tell me if I'm putting the wrong words in your mouth. You were resentful. There was frustration. You were asking the question, really? This is what family is like in the
Mhm.
modern world? And I think what you started to understand, in part by being part of the ILA community, is there was so many forces bigger than you and Graham that were pushing you into that.
Yeah,
And it's like these invisible forces, and the frustration and argument was happening in a personal, at home way, but there's these larger systems that kind of push us into this. So anyways, you were able to make some change, and you really have set things up in a very different way today. What's different today? How does it feel different today for you? Let's start with that.
yeah. Well, I just want to underscore one thing, Jessica, to be clear that there were reasons why Graham was behaving how he was behaving that really were in some ways out of his control. And that brings us to, one major thing we changed was sharing the mental load, which a lot of people are talking and writing about today. And just basic logistics. My husband was never on the school emails. And in fact, many schools only ask for one contact. So talk about a system not being set up so that, both parents can be involved. That was a basic fundamental shift that we could make by saying, hey, every email that you send needs to come to both of us. So that's just an example of the
Yeah.
kind of shift that we've been able to make.
Yeah, and you have a funny story about signing up for summer camps where
Yeah,
you both got to see what it really means when someone takes ownership, the shared, takes ownership of the role of signing up for something. Graham was taking ownership for signing up for sailing camp, I think it was. And what did you both discover from that experience?
well, he had no idea how frustrating summer camp signups are. And, I can understand that. You would think, oh, well, you just go online and fill out the form and there you go. But he spent 2 hours online trying to get our girls signed up for sailing camp, which was very important to him as a sailor. And anyone who's ever tried to do it knows about the wait lists and the age cutoffs and the how do you carpool and the different times. And uh, you know he ran into all these troubles while trying to sign our girls up for summer camp for sailing. And he had quite a light bulb moment where he could see that, wow, there's a lot of work here that was invisible to me that he could not see.
Yeah, yeah. So as you're listening in today, one big thing we're hearing about is this concept of invisible work and how to make it visible. And we're not gonna spend as much time on this because I'm watching the clock. But one of the things that Jana did was looked at the book Equally Shared Parenting, and it has this great list of different tasks that go on with helping a family function well. And she used that list to make it more visible about what is it that we all need to do and What am I doing? What are you doing? How are we sharing this list of things? So that's one way to make it visible. There's another thing that I think can sometimes is less visible. It's how our norms at work influence what's happening at home. And so Graham was also being influenced by norms at his workplace. And how did that shape things, and how has that shifted?
Yeah, well, he had, long work hours, as one does. He worked for a company that made outdoor camping gear, and he ultimately became the president of that company. Um, but he was kind of beholden to the culture and the um, kind of the way things were run and the owner's vision of the company, which did not have a lot of flexibility. And not only that, he traveled a ton for work, both internationally and domestically, which sort of required me to be a flexing parent because, how does one handle the travel like that otherwise? So um, so yeah, there were these strictures around his life that even though he wanted to be a major part of his girls' lives, there were things that were holding him back.
Yeah, yeah. And so we're going to get to in a second how, yes, Jana's life has changed. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, but Graham's life has changed as well. Um, and so in a second, I'm going to ask you, why does this feel better, this new arrangement where it's more of a shared approach? And before we get there, though, so yes, you made some things very transparent about what has to happen for a family to function, and how do we divide up this in a way that feels equitable. Equal's not the goal, equitable is the goal, and it's going to be customized for different families. And also, how do we think about how work is impacting us? And can we shift things at work so we have more time and energy to achieve what we want at home? Those are two important things that Jana did. Here's the third, and I think the most important. You told me it was a year of not letting it drop. So you
Yeah.
didn't bring this up once, get a little resistance and let go, and you didn't hit him over the head and have him run away screaming. What does that
Yeah.
mean? A year of not letting it drop. What does that look like? What should our listeners learn from that phrase?
Well, so when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, Graham knew that not only would I need logistical support at home, but that I was going to need emotional support working through that. And so we instituted what we called red couch nights. And they were cheaper than date nights, and they didn't require childcare. So we would, put the kids to bed and just sit on our red couch and talk. And it was intense. One thing that was happening is I was involved in the ILA community. I was reading and learning so much. And so I would just bring up things I'd read or ideas that we had discussed. And then I would just listen. Um, Certainly we did debate a lot, but I knew that I wasn't going to just be able to tell him something and convince him. So a lot of it was introducing new ideas into our family and letting him kind of mull them over. And it was a contentious year, but it was always also a really connecting year. And yeah, it wasn't one
Yeah,
conversation, it was many.
yeah, yes. So as you listen in, that's probably the secret sauce. It's a year of not letting up, and not in a way where you're creating anger over and over again in an unhealthy way, but that red couch approach where you're putting some ideas out there and listening and learning about each other and discovering things together. So here's Graham. You told me this fabulous story. Now his brother's about to have a baby. What did you notice him do talking to his brother not so long ago?
Yeah, this was really fascinating. We'd been having these types of conversations for a year, and his brother was in town with his wife, and Graham said, "Well, we need to have an intervention with them. kind of chuckling. He sat them down and he basically told his brother everything that we had talked about and learned, and that, this idea that you're going to think you're doing a lot, but there's stuff that you don't know that needs to be done. And he just encouraged his brother to, look for his blind spots, give 60, expect 40, just laid it out, all the different ways that, you know, that men sometimes don't see what's going on in terms of all the household tasks and all the kid tasks, the mental load, the emotional load, the logistics, the calendar, all that kind of stuff. And so that's when I knew, oh my gosh, my husband really gets it. It was amazing.
And again, as you listen in, what you heard at the start was that there was stress, resentment, frustration in their family system. But now what's happened, because of that year of working at it in a way that was constructive, they're at a very different place. They really feel like a team at home. And Jenna told me one more thing about how this has benefited Graham. Again, he's kind of changed work around in a way that's more true to who he is. He's really been able to think about that. He's feeling like he's now a preacher about these ideas to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how it's also really different. They really have a sense of teamwork. And Jana told me, Graham's a dreamer. And now, because they feel like a team, they're dreaming together. Any other last ways that this has really benefited Graham, benefited you, before we talk about what's coming next?
Yeah. So one huge thing that happened is a year and a half ago, we actually both decided to take our family on a big sailboat trip. And it was something that we had always dreamed of doing with our kids. But once we had kids, it really felt impossible, both financially and logistically. But once we were on the same team kind of at home and having these conversations, we really started dreaming like, okay, what do we want to do and how can we do it? And what's really neat too is now that we're back from that year-long trip, Graham is starting a company and he's instituting all of these, flexible time, flexible space. They don't have a central office, lots of virtual working into this new business that he's doing. And it's so neat to see him instituting policies in his new company that, we're only a dream before we had all these conversations.
Yeah. So as I predicted, as you listen in, what you really heard is yes, Jana maybe was the one who motivated this change, but Graham has really benefited from this change. And obviously you can imagine what those two young ladies in the picture are benefiting from seeing their parents really work as a team, and how they're going to have very different expectations of what they're looking for. So what we're going to do next is, you might remember as part of our Thursday webinars, is we have a live Q&A where we're going to ask and answer some questions. This is not recorded, so you have to actually be on a webinar to hear the live Q&A. Excuse me, I'm about to cough. And people who listen into the Q&A this year are going to be able to be entered in a raffle for the Grateful Dad, excuse me, a tickle in my throat, pamphlet that you see on the screen. It's this lovely little pamphlet that you can give to a new father to help them imagine how to really be involved that first year. And that is a great way to start a peer marriage, a shared care marriage, is just to get dads involved right from the start. So all of our listeners will be able to be eligible to put their hat in the ring for the raffle for the Grateful Dad first year parenting guide. So stick around. We have a couple of excellent webinars coming up next month. You can also find all of our webinars on iTunes. And, don't forget, we've got a lot of great resources available. So stick around for the live Q&A, and thanks for joining us today.